I'm I Will Dominate, and this is Thorin's channel. The guy who, if I keep on associating with him, will get me banned on Twitch eventually.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Thinkcard, who is obviously an LCS champion coach, which we'll get into in this discussion. But actually, one place I want to start is, normally I don't really care about this stuff, but you have a very unusual username, Alias. Why this Alias?
Oh, it's honestly pretty lame. I just did like Xbox Live randomizer, and it gave me Thinkcard when I was like 7th grade, and my friends were like, I kind of like that, so I just kept it.
Well, like any name, when you actually then do something, it becomes iconic and unique, doesn't it? So now it adds all these extra associations. By the way, one thing I thought I'd ask you straight from the outset is, obviously a lot of your success came later in your career, and you were a player originally. Do you have a sense that, like, did you ever think like the esports dream was just going to be short-lived for you, or you'd be a background character, as it were? I mean, you've kind of like blossomed late in your career, right?
Oh, totally. My parents pretty much told me, like, you should try to do this for maybe 2 years. And so after my second year being a player, I was like, this is going nowhere.
Right.
So I went to coaching for a few months, and then Jack offered me the head coach of Cloud9 Challenger, and that was like the stacked roster of high lemon balls. And so I straight up took it for pennies to the dollar, and just like a big bonus if we made LCS, because like in my head I'm like, if I can't make LCS with this roster, I probably shouldn't be a coach. And after that, yeah, it's been going well.
So if people don't know, you actually were a player a long time, basically 10 years ago now. Like you were in the Challenger scene, you were working your way up. Later on, you had some time in some bigger teams, right? In the early days, obviously you were a jungler. Were you a good player? Were you a prospect? Is there a reason why you didn't get into bigger teams?
I think out of solo queue, I was actually like a very, very hyped prospect. I just think looking back, I don't think anyone really taught me how to play the fucking game. Like, I got ranked 1 in solo queue. I was very good mechanically. I understood how to snowball in solo queue. But every time I played in competitive, it just like, I thought I knew what was going on, but not really. And then when I became a coach, within the first like 6 months to a year I was coaching, I realized that almost nobody knows how to actually play the game in North America besides maybe a handful of players. So yeah, I at the time I thought I was good, but looking back, I don't think I was that good.
One of the famous instances that people might remember, just because it's one of those weird pieces of trivia in LCS history, is obviously you did get to play in the LCS as part of the forgotten lineup, which is, everyone remembers the part where the CLG main team, coached by Monty, came to Korea because they wanted to like secretly boot camp because they already knew they'd made the playoffs. Basically, I think it was something like they would just be either 4th or 6th or whatever it was. It didn't like really matter what seed you had, and obviously they inserted the subs, the replacements, like some movie or something. But the difference is, people remember the legends like Chowster and stuff coming back, or Hotshot, etc. But then you actually got to play these matches. Now, obviously, the team didn't win the games, but what was that like? I mean, was it actually a scenario where, like, was it like it looked like from the outside, they just threw together these players, like, just play the games? Did you get to scrim some? Did you think you could win the games?
We actually did not scrim a single game. And I blame Hotshot for that, because Hotshot thought we were absolutely fucked. And when we got into the house, like, obviously I'm like, yo, let's scrim, sure, like LCS. But Hotshot just didn't want to do it. He thought we were absolutely fucked. And then we basically almost won the first game. Yeah. We barely lost. And then he's like, oh shit, you guys are kind of better than I thought you guys would be. Maybe we should have scrimmed. I was like, oh, you fucking... But it was awesome. I played with Chaos, who was it? Nien in the top lane. Hotshot, GG mid, who can only play 2 champions, Zillion and Lulu. But yeah, it was a great time. That honestly, like, kind of put me on the map completely. Before that, I only subbed like 1 time before that. But after that, I think I got like the play of the week or some shit when I insect, like, because no one ever insect before on Lee Sin, or insect that many times on Lee Sin, and I did it, and that kind of like put me on the map. And then after that, Steve like contacted me and brought me on like the Team Liquid Challenger team. So that was honestly insanely fun. Even though we lost, we probably should have won 1 or 2 of those games. But even though we lost, it was hella fun.
After this, in the Challenger scene, you played with a lot of players. People will know. People like WizFusion, became Apollo later on. There was Keith McBreath, obviously, even though at the time he was actually a support, believe it or not, guys. As weird as this is, there was a whole bunch of players who became LCS pros or were around the scene at the time. Like, any of these players stand out, or any stories?
I mean, Apollo's our positional coach right now, so I'm still working with Apollo. It's crazy. I played with him like 10 years ago. Holy shit. I don't know. I remember playing with, I don't know if the community remembers Yasui, but Yasui would just
He was considered talent, yeah.
Yeah, he was really good, but he would just try to get to Diamond with a 100% win rate, and then when he lost the game, he'd start again. So he kind of ruined like his entire practice. But I don't know. Overall, pretty normal stuff. I don't think.
All right, what about this then? Let me ask specifically about Apollo then, because actually the fact that he became a positional coach isn't as shocking to me as maybe it would be to some people, because I always thought actually his LCS game as an ADC was very measured. Like he was a guy who sort of understood where he was in a matchup. He definitely understood when he wasn't going to carry a game. He was like probably the most famous, if people remember, Apollo Hako, probably the most famous go even bot lane ever in LCS. Like I get the sense this guy wasn't just like a lot of ADCs. He's not just clicking the mouse, right? He had something going on in his brain, right?
Oh, he's completely the bot lane positional goat. I've seen him navigate situations that are incredibly difficult to navigate as a coach, and like you said, he's super calculated. People have been begging him to become a bot lane positional coach or a coach in general for years, but he's like, nope, I want to be a player. I want to be a player. And then finally, 3 years ago, Andrew Barden, or maybe it wasn't Andrew Barden. It was for Golden Guardians. Danon was able to convince him to hop on board as the bot lane positional coach. And then as soon as I went to CLG, I was like, I'm bringing Apollo. So, yeah, I mean, he's honestly the bot lane positional goat.
Right, people will forget this, but the other instance where you got like a big time shot as a player was when you went to the IEM, the one that was in Germany in Cologne with CLG. And if people forget, this was basically the team where like they hadn't signed Smoothie at this time. Like, there's a world where, look, obviously it's fucked up to say this now, but like, if you'd actually like won this tournament, maybe they pick you up. Like, as you say, people were actually hyping you. Like, I even heard at the time there was like a few different players they were thinking of, and you were one of the names that was at least in the mix. You know, you were getting a tryout at the time, right? This tournament, if people don't remember, like CLG actually had a good run. They made it to the final. Like, the team you lost to, Gambit, was the like legendary Gambit that everyone remembers. So, give me some thoughts about this tournament. It must have been exciting.
That tournament was sick. I remember. Well, first of all, Diamond Prox was insane at the time. So he was an insane jungler. We were against, also our game against Pinoy. I remember Pinoy like solo kills double lift, and then like a Russian in the crowd. Like we were, the studio was so scuffed, and a Russian in the crowd right away was like, Pinoy is shitting on double lift so loud, and I just started like shitting my pants. I was like, holy fuck, like we're in it. We're in Europe. But that tournament was sick. I remember, I'm pretty salty because I got triple target banned every single game. And then like the one time they left Lee Sin in the game was when Diamond Prox could one pick it away from me. So I'm a little salty, but it was a good thing. Also, all of 2015, like people would still like the coaching staff would be like, okay, like maybe we should sub in Thinkcard sometimes. But honestly, Xmithy was like the biggest anomaly ever in esports, where he wouldn't like really practice that hard or put in that much effort, but was absolutely the goat on stage. So it was kind of frustrating for me, but completely understandable. Like what he won like 6 championships after that. So
that was mega, yeah. After this as well, in the challenger scene, because he've obviously played for the CLG like B team, as it were, people might not know that there's a whole bunch of players they would definitely know there. Like obviously, like Stixxay was going to come up a year later. He was already around. Lourlo was actually there. If people don't remember, before he got to Team Liquid. Give me some thoughts on some of these guys.
I love that team. Lourlo, he was so young. He was like 16, 17 at the time, giving 110%. He was like the Rumble god. Then we had. Yeah, Stixxay. I mean, Stixxay was he was a little bit mental booming challenger, but he was obviously completely cracked mechanically. He would just beat everyone bot lane if he wanted to, and then just pop off in team fights. So Lourlo and Stixxay both insane. And then Huni was kind of like scrimming with us for a bit. And obviously we all know what happened with Huni. He was pretty successful mid laner for a bit, and then he went to support. So we had some stacked people on that roster. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make it work as a 5-stack, but yeah, those were some good days. Those were also the days where we had that football coach for CLG.
All right.
Yeah, who came in, won LCS, and then was basically kicked out of the scene because he was pretty sketchy. But yeah, those are some good times.
If people don't know, like the statute limitations has gone on that, I won't know all the gory details. Basically, that guy got kicked because he did some stupid stuff, like sort of like told a player, like, I'd maybe like leave your contract or like go to another team or get more money. Something mental like that, like as the coach is obviously like a massive violation of like your job to the fucking company. So if people don't know, there was never some big scandal. Everyone wondered like, what was it or whatever. It was actually some minor thing, but it's just one of those things where I get it. If you'd only been a coach for a split, I would fire you after that. Like, okay, you know, like you work for the team, not the players, you know.
Yeah. He did keylog PCs.
Oh shit! Okay, I forgot about that one. Actually, that was a story Double have told years later. It's true. That is a bit weird. I will say that's a bit sus. That is true, especially because what are you trying to find that I'm typing in? That's what I'm thinking immediately. Right, as you said, we'll skip to where you were earlier on. Famously, when they first got like a legit challenger scene that actually properly worked, and famously people started to buy slots for. The famous number was $1 million was the perception that you could have an LCS slot for. It became a thing where famously Jack did cynically just use all his old great players that had won the LCS but were sort of falling off. He just put them in academy and like almost like boosted an LCS spot. And then obviously famously sold it to FlyQuest, right? Which obviously was your into FlyQuest too, I'm guessing. So when you came to coach this team, the obvious question is, when you're working with people like High, Balls, fucking Lemonation, like some of these, like, obviously two of those are super smart players to consider like mega minds and stuff like. How do you coach players like that? Is it intimidating? Were you did you take to it well?
I was nervous at first for sure. Honestly, the full lore behind it is I actually won the tryout to be their jungler, but they were thinking about using Rush or Contractz, and they used Rush for like 2 games. I was like, guys, like, just let me try out for analyst or coach. Use Contractz instead, and yeah, so then they tried me out as analyst for like 1. They're like, okay, this guy kind of knows what he's talking about. Then they brought in Contractz, and then that's like when I started coaching. But yeah, I was hella intimidated because it's fucking High Lemon Balls, Lemon Nation. Like, they have really good macro at the time. They kind of understand what they're doing. And I have my hats off to them because they honestly respected me like enough to listen to me in draft, to listen to me in review, even though probably some of the times didn't really know what I was talking about for the most part. So I think they were pretty respectful, but I learned a lot from those guys. I would say I learned the most from that year coaching them, and then in 2018 coaching Huni. Those are like the 2 years I learned the most about League of Legends.
When you say that, if people don't remember, this is obviously just before Contractz did his sort of rookie split where actually he was a sensation in Cloud9 and people thought he could have a long career. I mean, he did actually in the end, but he had to go that circuitous path. Does that mean essentially that you had a very even-keeled approach to being a pro? Like, if you're basically saying, actually just put this guy in, could you know he was better than you? Was it just not worth you trying to keep playing?
I just knew he had better fingers than me. I was like, dude, like, if I can just teach him to think about the game decently, or you guys can teach him how to think about the game decently, he'll just probably be better than me on the Rift. And I knew that my time as a player was probably going to be coming to an end. So I might as well like just kickstart my coaching career with this opportunity. And like I said, it seemed like something that was a win-win. I would just make LCS, and then it would make my coaching stock go higher, and then that would be a very easy way for me to enter the scene.
An obvious question, and we'll bunch it together, is it must be really satisfying all these years later, at this point, like 8-9 years later, to actually have the success with Contractz and we even go to Worlds, etc. Like, that's kind of an amazing story, right?
It is amazing. It's crazy that he's been grinding this whole time. It is, I will say, It is probably harder to do it as a player, to grind, like have a high and then go back to the lows through the slums of academy, grinding your ass off and then make it back. Like 9 years is an insanely long time to grind as a player. So that I obviously I need to give him a lot of credit because that's just a crazy story in itself.
Do you two have a connection beyond just player and coach? Like, have you been friendly throughout the years? Did you pick up the relationship again? What was it like?
I think we're cordial. I think overall something that I figured out in 2020 is that it's not super healthy for a coach player to actually have like an insanely close relationship. So I do try to distance myself a little bit from the players, even though some of them like I'm definitely friends with, like I'll joke around with and stuff like that. But it's just easier to coach and be successful when you do have that kind of barrier. So we're definitely cordial. There's definitely a lot of mutual respect. But it's like a professional relationship.
When this team, the Cloud9 team, got promoted and it became FlyQuest, it's actually when FlyQuest entered the scene, if people don't know. People might remember this first split was the one that actually was kind of a banger. It's like the team almost came third and it was actually like challenging, even though, again, it was all the boomers. And people at the time thought people like, I were going to retire and just go off into the sunset. Can you give me some thoughts? Like, what was this team able to do? Like, was it already that good when it was a challenger team? Did it level up in the LCS? What was the story?
Challenger, we honestly were beating every single LCS team in scrims except for like TSM. So we were pretty confident going to the split, but every single prediction was FlyQuest 10th place, FlyQuest 10th place, FlyQuest 10th place. And then we won the first 5 games of the season, and the biggest question mark was Moon, because Moon was very young jungler, but he was good at following directions and listening. And High, like when he's on point, he's fucking on point. So we just started off running, and yeah, we we honestly should have done better than fourth. I think we ended fourth in spring split, and we honestly were a top 2 team. But yeah, we kind of trolled at the end. But we were really confident. Altec at the time, like when he got his champions, he was absolutely smurfing it. And Lemon Nation, that was the year when like Malzahar's support was a thing,
right.
and he figured that out faster than anyone. So we got a bunch of free wins on stage because we just fucking played Malzahar support.
Let me ask you a question. People actually have heard, obviously, like as well as streaming, there were some videos that had voice comms of High when he was in Cloud9, but he's also one of those players where I've known people. One of my like secret ins in the scene is the people that get to know, if you're like a journalist, by the way, is get to know like the referees. They can listen to what the players say in the comms. It's actually OP. So in the same way as I always knew in Europe, actually, that a Yellow Star was like this. So basically, he talks the whole game, but everything he says makes sense and is logical, is like information that's like valuable. It's never like signal noise. People have heard from those comm videos. High was fucking unbelievable at sort of like being a battlefield general, right? Can you give me some thoughts on working with him or how he thought about the game?
He was pretty. When he would make a call, sometimes it wasn't the most calculated, but he was very good at navigating it. So in a lot of like the famous Cloud9 clips, actually like their side lanes and stuff aren't in like a very good situation, but like he's so confident and so like he gives so much confidence to his teammates that the odds are the play is gonna work. And so basically that entire season in the beginning, we were just so good at fucking doing Barons. And so as soon as the game turned 20 minutes, we can be down 2,000 gold, 4,000 gold, and he was so good at navigating that time frame of the game that no matter what, it just felt like we were always going to win. And every player had confidence in that. Every player had confidence that we just had to get reach item spikes. And when High is on, he's on. He's such a momentum-based player, which is why, like, sometimes when you start to lose, it looks like he's kind of inting. It's because, like, he really relies on his confidence and his ability to command his teammates and have them trust what he's calling. And as soon as that starts to falter, then, like, the entire game starts to falter. So, yeah, I've always joked around that if you're winning games, if you have momentum, like High was like 9 out of 10 times the perfect shot caller for your team, because if you have momentum, he's 1v9.
As you mentioned at the time, Altec was actually considered like a top prospect and people were excited. What happened in the summer where like he went to Dignitas and then like Wild Turtle came in? Why did this switch happen in the middle of the year?
I think he was nervous that we weren't going to do as well. And he was, something I'll give Altec credit for is he was very aware of when your stock is high as a player, you got to do something. Like you might have a bad split and then your stock immediately plummets. People have very short-term memory. So as soon as we did pretty well, he was like, all right, I got to go somewhere, maintain my stock or cash out. And he did. And he didn't, I don't think he really did that well on other teams he went to. But although I did coach him again on Echo Fox, but yeah, that was kind of his logic. And then as soon as he left, our CEO was like, all right, we can get Wild Turtle, our franchise ADC. I think he just won with DSM the previous split. So yeah, then we got Turtle.
What about after this? There's a weird, like, if this was like the interview, it'd be like, what went on in your resume? This, because obviously after this, right? Like, you did a good job this year. Like, you had some good results. You got decent players. Then after that year, you're just gone. You don't do anything in spring, and then you come back in summer for Echo Fox. What happened in the spring split? Why not retained, or why did you not have another offer?
Well, you skipped a year. In 2018, immediately I went straight to Echo Fox in spring. That was Huni just came from SKT, and that was the perfect player. I will say this to anyone. Huni, fresh off of SKT, when he first came to Echo Fox, was the most perfect League of Legends player I've ever coached in my life. He was shot calling everyone, respecting all timers, understanding tempo, communicating to his teammates, and I mean, that's why we just started off so well. We ended up getting third. Right. Once again, we were probably a top 2 team, but the bracket was a little bit scuffed. But yeah, Huni was so insanely cracked that year. Right. And then after Echo Fox was when I took a break, and I didn't get any.
I think what it did is, I think on Leaguepedia, what they've done is maybe you were like listed as an analyst that first split or something, and there was like a bunch of coaches. So I think they just skipped that first one. Fair enough. Then you were there for actually the good split. Well, let me ask this then: is the implication it's because he was just in SK Telecom and like Coma presumably drilled him and sort of made him level his game up a bit? Is that the implication?
I mean, 100%. He was so cracked when he first came. It was like he literally couldn't do anything wrong. I remember walking back to lunch with an arrow and just being like, I don't even know what to tell him. Like, he's literally doing everything perfectly. He's getting his teammates to do perfectly. Like, whenever he speaks in review, he's saying amazing things.
Right.
And he was just, it was amazing. That was, like I said, that was the other time I learned the most as a coach in my life. Like, he was so on point with everything.
What about this then? Because people will forget in that spring split, which, by the way, if people don't remember, is the iconic one where Doublelift had that incident in real life when he came back to win the finals anyway. What people forget is Team Liquid wasn't even that hot that split. They actually just came on in the plus. It was actually supposed to be your team and 100 Thieves should be in the final. And in fact, people might remember this was probably the best split for Dardoch because it was Dardoch and Huni as the top lane. And obviously, you could just gank the top lane. Can you give me some thoughts? Do you think this team could have won the LCS?
For sure. We definitely could have won the LCS. There were some meta shifts which were a little bit unfortunate, and I think our play, we didn't really maintain our play. I wasn't that good at just navigating like the ups and downs as a coach at the time. So as soon as we started to struggle, I think like our play kind of bottomed out for too long. Usually it like goes up and then down and up again, and I'd be able to spike by the time playoffs are around. But at the time I wasn't that good at navigating that. So I don't think we were playing at our best when playoffs came around. But in hindsight, for sure, we definitely could have won that split.
I mean, one thing you're highlighting here is this is actually something everyone had to learn as coaching evolved. But initially, you notice if a fan talks about a coach, they nearly only talk about analytical things like the draft or what do you do in practice. One thing you're describing here is there's also obviously like leadership components, like how do I make people practice so we peak at a certain time, or what do I do when we go on a slump? It can't just all be analytics. Right? It's not just a draft pick you change. So is that something you've also had to develop as you've gone on, do you think?
Totally. I had zero skills with that when I first went into coaching. Like you said, I was all analyst. I was very good at drafting, pretty good at macro, but I had to learn everything else, like emotional regulation, making sure everyone is like mediating conversations, making sure I'm leading conversations, making sure that like everyone's homies, the atmosphere is good, and then all like the macro coaching aspects of like I said before, making sure we're spiking at the right time, making sure that like we're confident going into playoffs. Like it doesn't really matter too much if we're confident in week 5 and week 6 if that means we're going to be confident going into playoffs because we bounce back in time. So just managing emotions like that, I had to learn that completely. There was not really too many resources for me. The one person that definitely helped me, I think, was Edward from like last year. We hired him on CLG, and then
the Mind Body Esports guy, right? Yes.
Yeah. He helped me a lot in that regard of making sure that like all this structure stuff tied into the way that we practice and the way that the players are mentally prepared going into like the actual important parts of the season.
Right, being as you coached Dardoch, like I said, you're in one of his best splits. I want to ask about the duality of Dardoch. So on the one hand, one of the reasons I was always a massive fan is there was a sort of genius to how it reminds me of Jankos, and people don't know back in the day. You could just find ganks out of nowhere early in a game on like under-leveled or a matchup where you think there isn't one. But at the same time, that's why he kept getting all these amazing tries. Because I heard in scrims he was a fucking insane player, mate. But the reason why he was on a different team every year is then there's obviously like, I don't even know that toxic's like the word because it's such an overused term. I would say he could be a difficult personality, and he has to be. I mean, I've heard he has to be coached a very specific way. Can you give me some thoughts on both sides of Dardoch?
We can talk about Dardoch. I respect Dardoch a shit ton. I think that like his downfall is he expects such good play from his teammates and such good like effort because he hates losing so much that he expects his teammates to hate losing just as much and to be as accountable as he is. And when he starts to not see that, that's when some of his negative traits used to come out. And I do think like he definitely was too extreme with some of those negative traits. But in terms of like his drive and the way that he sees the game and his skill, he was insanely talented. It's just unfortunately in League of Legends, you're not going to have, especially in North America, you're not going to have 4 other teammates that share that. So he definitely could have done himself a service by just changing his attitude and accepting that like it's his job to kind of help his teammates and lift them up, and like they are going to make mistakes the same way that he's also going to make mistakes sometimes. But as like a player and like how passionate he is, he really was like 10 out of 10 in that regard. He just, as soon as things started to go poorly, he definitely struggled with dealing that aspect of the game.
In the summer split this year, one of the big moves actually was Echo Fox splashed and got Smoothie, if people don't remember. He was like a really good player at the time. He's actually another one of those people, I do think, sadly, because he didn't win the championship, has been sort of underrated in history. Like, can you give me some thoughts on this guy? I've heard he actually was like all the things that everyone used to say on Reddit. Like he was a great shot caller, he understood all the matchups and stuff. Can you give me some thoughts?
Yeah, when we got Smoothie, we thought we were just going to win the split. We had Smoothie, and then we were debuting Loss on 80, and Loss was Lost Smoothie just were smurfing on everyone in scrims. They were 2v2ing anyone, beating double lift in scrims. It just felt like on both sides of every matchup we would win. And then that was when we moved Damonte to mid lane. So now we just had like a role player mid to kind of work off of our bot lane carry and Huni playing in top. So we thought we had like an insanely talented team going into that year once we made those roster swaps. And Smoothie, I feel bad for Smoothie because like he was on Cloud9 and that was the year that Cloud9 was what? They were like 1-9. They were struggling really hard. They gave us Smoothie and then immediately won like 13 games in a row and like made it to Worlds. It's just like, oh shit. And then we didn't even make it to Worlds. So I felt really bad for Smoothie. But at the time, he was the premier support. It was like he can lane pretty well. He understands macro, warding timers, tempo resets. Like he definitely was a very good support at the time. But unfortunately for him, he was just never really able to make it click with all the teams he played with at the time. So he doesn't really have that many accolades.
Are you someone where when you didn't make it through the regionals on these years, I mean, this one particularly was a real chance to, like you say, like the team looked like it was kind of loaded. Yeah. Obviously, later on, the story gets good and you get to go to Worlds, so we know it all ends well. But what is it actually like in those scenarios? Like, did you have the expectation, like, I'm going to go to Worlds? Like, it's like a big goal for me. Is it a setback if you don't go? Can you just brush it off? What were you like?
At the time, every year, I mean, orgs were so bad at fucking building teams. So it's like every year the owners just thought like, all right, our goal is to make Worlds. We're going to make Worlds. And if you didn't make Worlds, you felt like you just completely fucked up. So at the time, I definitely thought that maybe I was doing something wrong or my career probably wasn't going in a very good path. But I do think all the rosters did kind of have some holes in the way that they were created. That year, I think Huni ended up actually getting really sick in playoffs, so that was super unfortunate. Right. We lost like a best of 5. It was insanely close, and like he couldn't even function on game 5. He was like, just pick me Cho'Gath or something, and then like we didn't do that well. But yeah, that was definitely hard, and I couldn't even find a job going to spring in 2019. So I just grinded. I started uploading just like random every single game in LCS. I would analyze it and just upload it to YouTube. Right. Like basically building a resume. Obviously, I'm not going to get viewers because who wants to watch 45 minutes of some guy analyzing a video? But it was basically just building my resume going into 2019, and then that was when Clutch ended up picking me up, but. They had Huni, Damonte, so I pretty much knew that roster. They had Cody Sun, Lyra, and Lyra at the time was really, really good. Yeah. And I could not believe that this team wasn't even making playoffs, wasn't like a top team in the league. So I was kind of rage tweeting about them, which I think kind of put me on the map for their management.
Oh, like they liked the feedback and they thought like, right, let this guy have a go then, something like that.
Yeah, then Andy Barden was like, he couldn't believe that I wasn't on a team apparently. So when they're looking for a head coach or assistant coach, they immediately just interviewed me and brought me on. So hats off to Andy Barden for recognizing that it was actually like a good roster. And same with Nasser, the analyst for FlyQuest right now, insanely talented. He also thought the roster was really good, but just the coaching could have been better. So yeah, they brought me on. That definitely saved my career. So very thankful.
I notice in your career a theme that sort of underlies it that maybe people won't have noticed, but they'll get when I say it now, is whether it's players or people in orgs or coaching figures, knowing the right people really is everything in this industry, right? It's not even just how good you are. You've got to know the person who knows that you're good in that way and they want to bring you in for a job or can play with you or work with you. It's a big part of the industry, right? A lot of these people just pop up again and again in your career.
It's definitely hard to just trust the unknown in esports. So as soon as you work with people that you know are 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 talented, of course you're going to go out of your way to work with them again. And you already know kind of the dynamic between you two. So I do say nowadays it's definitely getting better in terms of hiring new people and having better application processes and figuring out like if this person's actually good at this job. But back then the hiring process was so shit that it was for the most part, usually better to hire someone that you knew was very good than to take a risk on someone who might be amazing, but also might shit the bed.
One of the things about the Clutch Gaming team that people will always forget is this. Because that was when Team Liquid was in their run where they won the 4 titles in a row, right? 4 titles in a row sounds like they're so dominant, but people will forget this is a 5-game series you guys had against them, and it was mad winnable. Like, give me some thoughts on this one. Like, I think if people forget, I actually think Team Liquid at this time, they used to almost like sleepwalk through some of the playoffs and just hope they picked it up in like a game 5 or like double lift had a pop off, right? What was it like? Did you think you could beat these guys? Did you have the game plan?
Going into it, I mean, we had so much blind confidence at the time because when you play with Huni and you're kind of winning and going on a run, he's so contagious for the confidence he gives to his team. So we had all this blind confidence that we trusted ourselves. We trusted that we can kind of beat anyone if we play well. And yeah, everyone thought they're just going to quick 3-0 us. Even Doublift after the series was like, damn, like that series was really hard. Like they had really good compositions. They played the game really well. And they ended up winning because game 5, we had to choose between banning like, we could only ban 3 things, and we thought there were 4 things that we couldn't really beat. And so we were like, all right, fuck it. Like, we'll give them Sona, and maybe they won't pick it. And then they picked Sona, and they fucking murdered us. So.
Oh, because they did the Sona Taric bot lane, is it? I'm guessing, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Okay. So I definitely regretted that one. But yeah, that was an insane series that we even made it to 5 games. And after that, it sucked, but we got a lot of confidence for that for sure. It's like, if this is the best NAS to offer, then we should be able to beat every team in North America if we get another chance.
One thing I wanted to ask was, at the time, one thing people did acknowledge about Clutch was you had like your own style of play. Like famously, you would have those couple of champions that Huni, if you got him onto, you could essentially just play through him and run the map that way, right? It was like Rumble and what was the other one? Like, it was another one as well, right?
Well, we had Kiana mid for Damonte.
There you go. There's that one.
And then we had Irelia Flex for mid top. Yeah, we basically just had all these champions that specialize in specific aspects of the game. And at the time, we were like the only team in the world that was prioritizing Herald. And now every team prioritizes Herald. It's just an OP objective. But at the time, it was way more OP because it was like pre 10 minutes. If you get it, you pretty much automatically get first turret. And it was just so insanely OP and no one understood it. And we were pretty much the only team that had like this really huge flow chart around how much should we prioritize it? When should we actually give it up? When we should lane swap and put numbers on it and then get first turret? Like no one else had any of these, and we were so far ahead of the meta back then.
Right, being as at this time, it was actually also one of the best periods of Damonte's career. Obviously, someone you've been involved with, even coaching-wise later on. I want to ask about this player, because first of all, I do remember he was one of the only people that actually played the Kiana mid at the time. There's a lot of like top players didn't bother. And then also, I think to me, that was the defining quality of his career. It's like when he was on his champions, he clearly didn't know what he was doing. It's just like maybe he wasn't like the most well-rounded player or something. What would your thoughts be?
Damonte has like a lot of positive things about him that is really hard to see from the outside. I think everyone kind of sees that like he wasn't the strongest laner, but just like that attitude and atmosphere he brought to the team is something that you kind of overlook when you first come into the space, but something you really start to respect when you are actually in the space for a while. He got everyone confident. He got everyone having a good time and made sure people were having fun in practice. And Huni kind of needed that as well. But then Huni was also good at kind of like not really holding Damonte's hand, but teaching him how to like play side lane and playing macro and all this stuff in game. So you pretty much had 2 side laners that thought pretty similarly about the game that were now able to play off of each other. And I think that they helped each other a lot. And Damonte at the time, like you said, was one of the only people playing Kiana. And so that's one of the reasons why every single time we can get a team fight around Herald or Dragon and we're just Rumble Kiana, like you are never in your life out team fighting that before you get gold on your carries. Right. And at the time, teams were just not good enough at understanding, let's just give this Dragon number 3 and trade for top tier 2. Like teams were just not good at that yet. So we would get so many free team fight looks and it ended up paying off, obviously.
What about in the bot lane? If people don't remember, you had 2 people who at the time were obviously clear talents. You had Vulcan, who since obviously gone on to do brilliant things, but the other one was Cody Sun, who I have to say, even though at the time I was like a low-key hater, actually he had a way better career than I actually thought. And he actually was a talent, to be fair. Like I think he just maybe had a few hints that people remembered too well or whatever. Give me some thoughts on these guys, because obviously like one of them's more famous, but I think Cody Sun's pretty much forgotten now, mate.
Cody low-key made Worlds 3 times in a row. He was part of like the core. There were 3 ADCs that in North America who were the only ADCs who made Worlds in 3 consecutive years in that spree, and he was one of them. And he wasn't lane dominant. Like let's not paint it around, but like he would 5-5 every single matchup, just go even, and then he'd do well in team fights. And at the time, that was fairly good for an ADC if you were just very good at team fighting. And then Vulcan was new. He just came off of Academy, and he was very good on his engaged champions. He was super good at his Nautilus, his Leona. He was very good at Lux at the time as well, and that was when Lux was insanely OP. But yeah, that bot lane was pretty much what we needed, which was like a weak side to basically scale to level 4, level 5, level 6, while Lyra plays around mid top. And then once they get some levels, he can go through bottom. And then like it was such an easy way for us to play the game. So that team was like very, very well crafted. I have to give a lot of credit to Nasser and Andy Barden for putting that team together. That's one of like the most perfectly crafted teams that I have coached.
Since, as for people keeping track, like I said, the past ones you got disappointed in the regional. To win this regional was obviously itself cool, but anytime you can beat TSM and eliminate them and go to worlds, pretty ball. Like this was the split. If people remember, they almost won the spring split. Yeah, they had the mix up in the summer with like changing the players and all that jazz. But again, to beat TSM to go to worlds is a big deal, right?
Reverse sweep as well. We were down 2-0, and Huni like brings everyone in for a huddle. He's like, guys, we're not going to fucking lose to TSM. We cannot lose to TSM. And like really pumped everyone up. And for sure, that was crazy. We waited so long for TSM Legends to come out so we can watch the point of view of getting reverse swept.
Okay.
But that Gauntlet run was awesome. That was the second time ever that a team just went through the lower bracket and just won 3 best of 5 3 consecutive days to actually make it to Worlds. So that was an insane experience that at the time was like my highest dopamine hit of my career. That was insane.
If you had to evaluate yourself at this point, where were you as a coach?
I was pretty good. I would still think it was a little bit difficult for me to navigate a room when you did have such high profile players on the team. So with Huni on the team, it was pretty difficult for me to like really be that authoritative figure when I needed to. Because Huni, I mean, he made like 15 times more money than I did. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Sure, of course.
But yeah, so at the time, I think I was very good at a lot of things, but I was still kind of lacking in like the leadership aspect in certain regards of coaching. So I definitely had to learn that over the next few years before I came to CLG.
If anyone knows my content, they know one of my main things is I like context. I don't just like details, right? So what's funny is everyone memed on this Worlds run because they went, it's one of the first times a major region's ever gone 0-6. Here's what I'll explain to you guys. They had the most insane group of death of all fucking time. They had T1 who were like Korean champions. RNG was just in the LPL finals and Fnatic was in the EU finals, almost beat G2. Like, look, okay, maybe you could say maybe you should win a game off Fnatic or maybe you could, like, one game would be good, but this is a pretty fucking nightmare group though. It's pretty tough, right?
Yeah, that was pretty fucked. Like you said, we probably should have won one game off of Fnatic. In one of the games, we're up like 5,000 gold at like 12 minutes in, so we definitely should have won that one. But yeah, SKT and RNG were so insane. They were absolutely insane. They were at all aspects. They were like just the best teams at the tournament, and we were not super prepared to go against that after our run in North America. But yeah, it was a learning experience. I do think we did do better than other NA teams, despite the fact that we won 0 games. Like, we at least were proactive and doing our own plays and trying to play the game that we wanted to play instead of just sitting back and waiting for other teams to mess up, which was like the classic team that won LCS would just go to Worlds and try to do the exact same thing of just sitting back and scaling and waiting to actually win the game. So at least we tried to play the game correctly, but yeah, that was tragic. Going 0-6 fucking sucked, not gonna lie.
One thing, no matter what the result is, when people go to Worlds or the international tournaments, I think is obviously if you get the right experience, that can be invaluable. Like, I've always thought just the boot camp alone is sometimes amazing. If you get the right scrims, if you're into the right meta, people get to actually, like, what people don't understand if they're a fan is, even if you lose the scrim, sometimes just seeing on screen that you like killed Faker or like Rock Doozy out, these are like a big deal. Like, that matters to people. Like, what would you say like the experience of going to Worlds was like the first time?
I loved it. It's so insane to see all these different regions come together with all their different ideas of how to play, and then just fucking clash and be like, okay, this team's playing range bot lanes, they're fucking shitting on us, but then like they really struggle to play 12 to 15 minutes because they have a range support. This team is playing through top permanently. This team only plays through mid, and everyone tries to figure out how to play the game correctly. It was awesome. I loved it for the first time. And yeah, you have an opportunity to gain confidence, like you said. You're obviously going to show up and get absolutely shit on because these teams are better than you. But in obviously last year, we came in, we got shit on immediately by all the top teams. But then at the end, we were taking games off of all these teams in scrims. So it really is a race to learn from them and not get too demoralized when you are going to get absolutely destroyed in the beginning. and then get some like actual positive takeaways from it. And then you start to build confidence. Like, okay, like honestly, this bot lane, they're good. They're not like insanely good. Like we can compete with them, and same with mid. And once you start building that confidence up, then you realize like we're loading into the game on even terms. As long as we play well, we can compete with anyone.
I get that the league team is the league team, not the franchise itself. But the fact that this team, if people don't remember, was owned by the Houston Rockets, like, was there any like interesting stories around that? Like, at a minimum, it must be cool to tell your parents or something. Like, I actually do work for like essentially the Houston Rockets. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, at the time, I mean, there was absolutely no perks from that situation, but it was cool. In 2018, Echo Fox was owned by the Yankees, and I grew up in New York City. I was like, this is fucking awesome.
Okay.
I'm working for the Yankees pretty much, but there honestly was like there were no perks at all.
Sure.
It was pretty bullshit.
Because obviously, if people don't remember, that's how Dignitas re-entered. They bought the slot from Clutch Gaming and the Houston Rockets people, and then you became the dig coach, right? When this move happened, was it just that did everyone transfer over? Did they actually do an interview process and hire you specifically as the coach?
We knew halfway through 2019. Honestly, before they even brought me on, the acquisition was already confirmed.
Right.
The person that interviewed me was also the CEO of Dignitas. They were pretty much already running the show. So even though we had Clutch Gaming on, that's why they changed our colors to Dignitas colors going into Worlds, even though we had the Clutch Gaming logo. And so yeah, we already knew it was happening. We knew they were gonna, or we hoped that they were going to keep all of us on, which they ended up making some adjustments to the roster. But yeah, we knew going into it that it was going to be Dignitas.
If people don't remember, this was the year where Dignitas's lineup was a pretty interesting one. And it initially began really awesome, like you were winning most of the games, because this is where my favourite Froggen was there. But then the bot lane was Johnson, who actually was like the rookie of the fucking year pretty much.
Yeah.
Afro, who was there. And then Huni was in the top lane. This is a pretty legit squad. Can you give me some thoughts on some of these players or what the squad was like?
I think all the players were really talented. I think it was just a very poorly constructed team. They kind of completely ignored what we wanted to do as coaches. But I've respected all of them a lot. Like it's still possible to get all this talent together and do well. But based on the way the roster was constructed, to me it was always going to be a struggle. But I have tons of respect for all the players on the team. Greg, I think, was kind of put into like a hard situation at the time. He was our jungler, but Huni was still good back then. Froggen was very good at his style. He wasn't very good at like
he's not an assassin role play, of course.
Yeah, stuff like that. And our bot lane, Johnson, Afro was really good with rookies at the time. So Afro helped Johnson grow a lot. But yeah, we just weren't really able to make it click. I think the roster construction was a little bit poor. And then as soon as you start to struggle with that team and like Froggen then wants to play the game that he wants to play, the way that he wants to play, because the team isn't like doing as well as like we want it to, then everyone wants to play the game the way that they want to. Huni wants to do it his good way, Froggen wants to do it his way, and we're not able to recover. So yeah.
Sure. Well, I will say one thing that I would spin into a question from that is also the curse that sometimes like smaller team coaches, when they don't have the big names, don't understand is it's not like the big names just go, yes, sir, and do everything you say. Like the big names, especially some of these people have been champions in different regions. Like they have their own thoughts on how the game's going to be played. And like potentially they only want like input from you. They don't want you to tell them what to do or how to play, right? Getting buy-in's part of being a coach too, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit tough to get their buy-in at some points. Like I said, that was like the year where I kind of realized that you got to take a step back and be their enemy sometimes. You can't really be everyone's friend. And I remember there were specific practices where, once again, Froggen, great player, I respect him a lot, but he would not listen to anything that anyone was saying. And then like we'd be in review and everyone would agree on someone. He was like, yeah, I just don't agree. And then he'd just stand up.
He loves to argue if people don't know. He loves to argue about stuff.
And then he'd walk back to his computer and just like start practicing or whatever, or just like warming up his fingers. And it's like, damn, like I didn't really know how to navigate that at the time. And honestly, like his teammates didn't really know how to navigate that either. Even Huni was like, damn, like on SKT, like people yell at each other a lot, but like at least they talk to each other. Like he didn't really understand how to navigate that situation as well. So I think it was hard. Maybe if I knew what I knew now, maybe we can make it work, but I still think it would have been very difficult.
Since after this, you had to go down a level and go to the academy, did you ever worry that, because this can happen, it happens to players, a bad split, a bad year, people just write you off? Remember, it's like that thing, you're only as good as your last game kind of, right? Did you worry that like, I'm just never going to get back again?
Yeah, for sure. I did the same thing that I did in 2019, where I was like, all right, I'm going to just do nothing for the first split, see which teams are on fire, and then maybe I can join like a team that's closer to the bottom, and then it's easy to make them better and look a lot better for yourself. But yeah, I wasn't able to actually make it back into the LCS scene. So halfway through, or in the beginning of Summer Split, I just reached out to Anero, and I was like, because he was begging me to coach their academy team for years, and I was like, okay, well, I'll fucking do it, man. Like, just bring me on. I'll get this team to be good. They were like 9th, 10th place at the time, not a very good academy team, and we ended up getting top 3. So ended up being good, but for sure I was a little bit worried. Living in LA, not really making good money anymore. It was rough.
In this esports world, it can seem like everyone's against you, but I've always got the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community, riding with me. And it is thanks to the support of the following people, this video and all of them on my channel are made possible. Matt, Pugnacho Rakula, Ahmed Haju, Frisky, Tosh, Jensen Gore, Animosity, Toucan, Tobias Bernasconi. If you've ever watched my videos, you know now I'm going to give a massive shout out to Jerky's Minion, the main man. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers? Find out who the upcoming interview guests are. Maybe you want to ask me a question. I tend to answer them at length in my video AMA. Do you want to take part in one of those Dignitas discussions where we talk about what you're interested in esports? Well, if any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below is a Patreon link.